I'm Amelie and welcome once again to my channel. Today I'm going to be continuing with my Modal Sushi book report, and I'm going to be talking about the second part of the refinement arc, also known as the Cloud Recesses arc, by me essentially. I don't know if other people call it like that. So you may have noticed that I haven't been around lately. I haven't been uploading anything or posting anything. I've essentially been gone for the past few weeks. And the reason for that is that I just had to take some time off to deal with some mental health issues, specifically my anxiety. And it sounds ridiculous because I was in the middle of a holiday, or, I was definitely not working. I was supposed to be relaxing. And that's the thing with me. I've suffered anxiety for the longest time, since I am a teenager at least. And what happens to me is that the moments where I'm feeling like I'm getting the most stress during the year, those are the moments where I probably can manage my anxiety just fine. It's when I relax that my anxiety hits harder for some reason. So it hit harder now. So I had to take some time off to manage it, to deal with it, especially because I tend to manifest my anxiety in terms of my physical health, like issues in my physical health. So it wasn't just dealing with my anxiety, but also dealing with the health issues that it brought about. And right now, I can't say that I'm completely fine, but I am getting better. I am definitely feeling better. And I don't know, I wanted to come back to doing this, which is something that I really enjoy, especially because right now my health allowed it. It wasn't just that I couldn't do this because of my anxiety, but because some of the health problems that it brought about, they just didn't allow me to do much. So now that I'm feeling physically better, I can do this and I'm happy. And also the bad news is I'm not longer on holidays. Then now I am officially back to work, which is bummer, but I guess it is what it is. I have to make money anyway. So this is something that I was really looking forward to do, because especially this video, I was supposed to do this video, I think in December, and things happen, I guess, but let's do it now. Let's talk right now about the refinement arc. So, I already did the first 2 chapters of the refinement arc. I divided the arc in this way because there is a clear division on it. The first 2 chapters talk about the present in the story, and the rest of the chapters are about the past, are about a flashback taking us to Wei Wuxian's time at Cloud Recesses as a teenager. So obviously there is a big distinction in between these 2 parts. That's why I divided it like that. But this division also means that the second part is going to be a lot longer, because it's, oh God, how many chapters? This is from chapter 13 to 18. So that's 5 chapters? I think it's 5 chapters, right? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's 6 chapters. Okay, thank God I don't do this in video, otherwise you will have to see me counting with my fingers. But I am shit at math. I'm so sorry. It is 6 chapters. So we have 6 chapters here, and they're not, I think they're as long as the other ones, but they're definitely very juicy. There is a lot to talk about in these chapters. So this is going to be a long video. What I'm trying to say is that this video is going to be a little bit different from the others. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the chapter, like a chapter, and then I'm going to do the commentary. In the past videos, what I've done is talk about all of the chapters, all of the story, and then do the commentary. For these ones, I'm going to do it this way because I have the feeling that if I do the whole history of these chapters, by the time I get to chapter 18, I would have probably forgotten all about chapter 13. So I think it's probably, going to make it more difficult to comment on it. Although I do have notes, obviously, but it's not going to be as fresh in my mind. In this way, I can, keep the chapter fresh in my mind. I can say more things about it. And also, obviously, I already said it's going to be a long video, and not everyone may want to watch it in one go. So what I'm going to do is put the time of each of the chapters in the description, so you can, watch, maybe listen to one chapter, then come back another day, listen to the next one, just to make it easier. Anything else that I have to say? I think not. So let's refresh our minds about what happened in the previous two chapters, in chapter 11 and chapter 12. So in these two chapters, we have Wei Wuxian being taken to cloud recesses by Lan Wangji. And I already said this is post-resurrection. So essentially, Wei Wuxian doesn't know that Lan Wangji knows who he is, but Lan Wangji definitely does. He recognized him the moment that he started playing their song, so he already knows that he is Wei Wuxian. So Wei Wuxian's plan is to leave cloud recesses, and he's doing everything he can to sort of bother Lan Wangji and disgust him and make Lan Wangji throw him out. And not only Lan Wangji, he's bothering everyone. He's not taking any chances. He's bothering everyone to get expelled from cloud recesses. Obviously, it's not working. On the other hand, we have everybody else in cloud recesses wondering why Lan Wangji is essentially just having this guy around. Why is he taking it to his room? Why is he sleeping with this guy? Obviously, they're not saying anything out loud, but I'm betting that there is some serious gossiping going around because, you have a guy like Lan Wangji who, is so serious. He never dated. You never seen him with anyone. He doesn't associate with anyone. He's not someone who socializes a lot. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you get this guy who acts crazy, and and also someone who's openly gay, because Mo Xuanyu, or especially Wei Wuxian as Mo Xuanyu, is going everywhere, informing everyone about, his, his preference for men. So, you have to imagine everybody else. I think I already talked about that in the previous video, but that is crazy to me. What other people must think about Lan Wangji doing that. I mean, Lan Xishen seemed pretty cool with it. He seems, oh, you brought a friend? That's nice. I mean, I guess he doesn't know Wei Wuxian yet, but okay. Okay, so that's pretty much what happened in the refinement arc. There's not a lot of action, just, Wei Wuxian doing things around cloud recesses and not being successful in leaving. And that's pretty much it. So let's go to chapter 13. So chapter 13 starts with Wei Wuxian thinking about his relationship with Lan Wangji, and in particularly thinking about why his relationship with Lan Wangji is as bad as it is. As far as he knows, anyway, like from his perspective, obviously. So, according to him, all of this bad blood between them originated when he was at Cloud Recesses when he was 15, and he went there to study. And apparently he went there to study for 3 months. And then we have some information about Lan Qiren. And first of all, we are told that Lan Qiren is a virtuous and prestigious leader, which we know. Well, actually not a leader, an elder. I can't read. I'm not wearing my glasses, but I don't know where my glasses are, so we are going to continue like that. He's a virtuous and prestigious elder. That's what he is. But I guess he's sort of a leader at this stage, at least, especially being that his brother is still alive and Lan Xishan still not like clan leader. I'm guessing that his position is, maybe not clan leader, but he must lead, to a certain extent, the clan. So the next thing that we are told is that not everybody in the cultivation world likes him. As a matter of fact, that he's not actually generally liked. The reason for this is that he's pedantic, stubborn, and a strict teacher. So everybody respects him, but it's not somebody they would like to hang out, essentially. And what we do know about him is that he has produced some excellent students. Apparently, Lan Qiren gets results. That's why everybody is so eager to send their children to Cloud Recesses to study, because they know that even if they are not very good, and here the phrase that it uses is pathetically useless. So if your child is not very good, if they are, pathetically useless, then if they study at Cloud Recesses, they know that at the end of it, they'll probably be more or less decent. Like, he's not going to do miracles, but, he'll be all right. And, well, we know that this isn't always true. And my dogs started doing their thing, but we are going to ignore them because I'm not starting this again. So after that, we get a conversation between Wei Wuxian and Chang Cheng, and we have that Wei Wuxian is not very happy about going to cloud recesses. As far as he's concerned, he's already pretty good. Like he says, do I not seem enough, decent enough I forgot how to read. Do I not seem decent enough as of right now? That is also because the grammar is a little bit strange there. I'm still reading the Exile Rebels translation, so maybe that's why. So essentially, Wei Wuxian is not, he doesn't believe it's necessary for him to go to cloud recesses. He thinks that it's already fine for him. Like, I'm already at my best. He doesn't need improvement. And Shang Cheng essentially tells him, like, and here it says with great deal of foresight, he tells him that you definitely be a mark of shame in his entire teaching career, meaning Lan Qiren. Definitely a lot of foresight there. So we have also that year, the people that went to cloud recesses to study were a group of people, specifically young masters, so no women, only young masters, and they were around 15 and 16 years old. We also tell that it was widely known by everyone that Wei Wuxian was not a young, that he was the head disciple or the leading disciple of the sect, but he was not necessarily like someone who belonged to the sect by blood. We are also told that Shang Fengmian had adopted him because he was the son of a friend who had passed away, and that Shang Fengmian did see him as his own child, which is interesting. But the people that were there, like the students that were there, they didn't really care about this. It says that because they were young, they weren't too concerned about like ancestry. So they all became really good friends. And they are there, they are chilling, they're hanging out, and they start talking about like how maybe cloud recesses is very strict, it has a lot of rules. And they start asking Wei Wuxian whether Lotus Pier is the same. If they have a lot of, if it has a lot of rules, if it's very strict. And they said that no, it's actually the complete opposite, that Lotus Pier is actually very last in comparison, that, it's a much more, relaxed place to be in. So, Shang Cheng mentions that actually Wei Wuxian laces around all the time, that he doesn't practice, he doesn't meditate, but he would rather spend his time boating, swimming, picking lotus seeds, and hunting pheasants. To this, Wei Wuxian says that even though he does all this, that he doesn't practice and all of that he's still number one in the sect, which again, a lot interesting, but I'm going to talk about that later. And one of the students there, mentions that they would like to go study to Yumeng the following year. Instead of studying in cloud recesses, they would like to go there. And somebody else told him, like, quit dreaming, because if your brother find out that you are going to study to Lotus Piers, he'll break your legs. And obviously this person wanting to not be in cloud recesses is Nihua-san. And we get some information about Nihua-san and Niming-Jue. We have, Niming-Jue is his older brother, and it says that he's extremely resolute when carrying out orders, that he's renowned in all the cultivation world. Something interesting that it says is that Nihua-san and Niming-Jue, they are only half brothers, that they share father but not a mother, and that this is something that is not important for them, that the relationship is very good. Like, for them it's just like they are brothers and that's it, as it should be. And we also have that Niming-Jue is a little bit harsh on his younger brother, especially when it comes to his studies. And again, this is also something that I'm going to comment about. And Nihua-san respects his brother a lot, but he's also a little bit scared about Niming-Jue when it comes to his schoolwork, which it makes sense because Nihua-san is a little bit lazy. He's not somebody who's very academically inclined, let's just say. So, Wei Wuxian says that even if they are in Gusu and you had all these rules, that they can still have fun as well. But Nihua-san tells him that there is one person in cloud recesses that he shouldn't provoke, and that is not Lan Qiren, that is Lang Wenji. So we get some information about Lang Wenji, but specifically also the two shades of Lan. That is a very difficult phrase to pronounce for me. The two shades, jades of Lan. So Lang Wenji and Lan Xishen. And what we know about them is that they are the sons of the current sect leader, that even when they pass 14, like they were considered as like the models of all disciples, not only by the lands, but by all the cultivation, that they were exceptionally famous. So all of the juniors knew their names and everybody recognized them. And what we know about Lang Wenji is that he's stiff, strict, and even worse than his uncle. Now, Wei Wuxian ask a question that is very important, and he says, is he the lad who looks quite pretty? Because of course he did, of course that is what he noticed. And then we have something that Shang Chen said that is also interesting, that he says that there are no ugly people in cloud recesses, that apparently they don't accept people who look average or worse, which I had to imagine that, I don't know, trying to enter, trying to enter to cloud recesses is probably like going on an audition for American Next Top Model. That's what I'm imagining. But there are other questions as well. Like I'll comment on it later. So, definitely Wei Wuxian emphasized that they are very pretty. And then he describes Lang Wenji in this way. It says, white from top to bottom, wearing a forehead ribbon and carrying silver sword on his back. He looked rather handsome, but with his straight face, he looked like he was mourning. So Nihua-san says, yes, that's him, that's Lang Wenji, and that he doesn't understand how Wei Wuxian knows, because Lang Wenji is supposed to be in secluded meditation for the past few days, and that he had only come out the day before. So then we found out, much to the disapproval of Shang Chen, that Wei Wuxian had broken curfew, I suppose the night before, to get some Emperor Smile. We know Wei Wuxian and his Emperor Smile, he has to get it. And just as he was bringing in, he was caught red-handed by Lang Wenji. And this went out as well as you can imagine. Lang Wenji didn't want Wei Wuxian to come inside. He asked him what he had there. Wei Wuxian answered him, and he also offered to bribe him with it. He also tells him, like, if you don't say anything, I'm going to give you some of this. Obviously, this didn't go great. Big mistake. Lang Wenji seemed to get angry and wanted to make Wei Wuxian look at the wall of rules, where there are more than 3,000 rules, which Wei Wuxian considered unreasonable. And the others agreed that the rules of cloud recesses were strange and outdated, and we have some examples of these rules, which says, for example, killing livestock within the area is prohibited. Fighting without permission is prohibited. Promiscuity. I haven't spoken English in a while, so my pronunciation is not at its best. Promiscuity is prohibited. Venturing at night is prohibited. Causing noise is prohibited. There is a lot of running is prohibited. Sneering for no reason is prohibited. Sitting improperly is prohibited. Eating more than 3 bowls is prohibited. I'm going to talk about this later. But everybody seemed to agree that this is outrageous. Wei Wuxian says that he ended up fighting Lang Wenji, and he broke a jar of Emperor Smile. So Wei Wuxian drank the other one, at least he got something. And not only that, he drank it in front of Lang Wenji. And according to Wei Wuxian, if he drank it standing on the wall, it didn't count as breaking the rules because he wasn't necessarily in cloud recesses, which, again, that is an interesting logic. Lang Wenji didn't agree, so they fought again. And Wei Wuxian admits that Lang Wenji's skills are quite good. Nihua-san tells him that now Lang Wenji would be after him. So, because he was the one who was in charge of punishments in cloud recesses. But Wei Wuxian is not scared, since he thinks that Lang Wenji is such a prodigy and was in secluded meditation all the time, so he wouldn't have time to go after him. Boy, were you wrong. Believe me, when it comes to Wei Wuxian, Lang Wenji is going to make space in his schedule. Before they could finish this conversation, they turned the corner and passed by a window where there was Lang Wenji staring daggers at them. So they all shut up and entered the room, and that's it. They avoided sitting anywhere near Lang Wenji, which makes sense. So Wei Wuxian turns his head and stares at Lang Wenji's face, as one does, and he was about to start a conversation with him for some reason, and that is when Lan Qiren enters. And these are the things that Wei Wuxian notices about Lang Wenji as he was staring at his face. His lashes were long, appearing to be extremely delicate and elegant. His posture was also very uptight, looking straight ahead. Because, when you start class, it's your first day, you see a student there, you turn to talk to him, that is the first thing you notice. The long lashes and extremely delicate and elegant. And then we have a description of Lan Qiren, which says that he was tall and thin, he was, standing straight back, same as Lang Wenji, I guess. He had a long black goatee, but he was definitely not old, and which is interesting. Again, I think I'm going to talk about that later. And according to tradition of the Gusulan of producing beautiful men in each generation, so we know that Lan Qiren is good looking. He was definitely not bad looking either. I still sustain that without the goatee, things would have been very different. But unfortunately, he was pedantic and stiff, and nobody would feel wrong calling him an old man. So it's not that he was old; he has the aura of being old. He has he just projected being old. But in fact, he was probably just actually not that old and pretty good looking. I don't know if anybody calculated how old he was. I remember somebody saying that he was around mid-30s, mid to late 30s at the beginning of the story. And that is not that much older than me. So, he definitely wasn't old. He definitely wasn't. If that is the age that he actually was. If you know how old he was when the story started at this stage, let me know. So, as soon as Lan Qiren entered, he starts talking about the rules of the Lan sect. So, everybody was immediately bored. And Wei Wuxian was surprised that Lang Wenji was listening attentively. Apparently, Lan Qiren was doing this with the rules because he knew that nobody read them. They had this big rock at the entrance of Cloud Recesses where you have the rules, but apparently everybody ignored it. So, in this way, if he tells them the rules, they couldn't claim ignorance if they did anything wrong. And he also comments that there were people still not paying attention, which, Wei Wuxian felt that it meant him, and I'm pretty sure he's right. Very quickly he calls his name. Yeah. And he starts asking Wei Wuxian some questions, which Wei Wuxian answers correctly. And everybody's happy that he's answering all the questions because that means that Lan Qiren wouldn't get the opportunity to ask them questions. So Wei Wuxian is attracting all of the questions for himself. Lan Qiren, however, despite the fact that he's answering correctly, he's not very impressed. He thinks that since Wei Wuxian is a member of the Chang clan, it's the bare minimum that you can expect from him, the fact that he knows this. Then Lan Qiren asks a particular question. He poses a situation to Wei Wuxian, and this is a situation. He says that there is an executioner with parents, a wife, children, essentially a family, and before he died, he executed a backload of people, a lot of them. And suddenly this executioner, he dies in public, and to punish him for his deeds, he was left on the street for 7 days. Just his body was there, rotting. With the repressed energy of resentment, he started to hunt and kill. So what should be done? This is interesting because I would say that executioner is a job. Why does he deserve punishment for doing his job? If he was killing people that he was supposed to kill, obviously, I'm not in favor of killing people at all. Not even if they're criminals. I'm against, even killing people when, in jail, executing people. I'm against it. But in this case, it was his job. He wasn't doing it because he liked it, but okay. I'm going to accept this. So this is the situation that Lan Qiren poses. Wei Wuxian didn't answer immediately, so the rest of the class began to feel restless because they were confused by the question. They were afraid that they would have to answer, I guess. But after a few moments, Lan Churen chose Lang Wenji to answer, and he does well. Lang Wenji, you can tell him what should be done. So that's it. That is the end of chapter 13. So let's talk a little bit about chapter 13, which was, I think, again, it's not a chapter that a lot happens, but I think there is a lot of interesting things that were revealed in these chapters. First of all, we have very different time for how long the students stay at Cloud Recesses. In the Untamed and in the novel. Obviously, look, I'm guessing you already read the chapters. We know that Wei Wuxian is expelled, so he left early. So I don't know if, those 3 months that he said he stayed, or, were just those 3 months and he was supposed to stay a lot longer. I am guessing that it was, or if those were the 3 months and then he stayed in the middle and then he go. I don't know. But I think there is a difference in time. Although in the Untamed, I don't think we get a good grasp of how much time happens at all in the story. Never. So, I think in the Untamed, they were expected to stay they actually stayed for 6 months. I think in this one, probably the same, but we are not told because, Wei Wuxian only stays for about half. Also interesting that we have only boys attending. There is no classes for the girls, or at least in this class. Maybe they have a separate class and we're never told. I don't know. There is a lot of Chang Cheng and Wei Wuxian fighting each other, and I don't know. I think, look, there is a lot of things to criticize about Chang Cheng in the novel. That aspect of the relationship, I don't mind it. I find their banter to be pretty typical for brothers, especially teenage brothers. I had brothers who are pretty close in age and they were teenagers, and that's pretty much how they behaved. So I don't read too much into it. Like when Chang Cheng maybe tells him off, things like that. I feel that it's just the relationship dynamic. I don't feel that, I don't take it literally when they fight. What I did notice, or I did find very interesting, is that how maybe we're having some indication of Chang Cheng's jealousy towards Wei Wuxian when he says that, Wei Wuxian doesn't practice, he doesn't meditate, he doesn't do anything, and he's still number one. Obviously, he doesn't say he's still number one. Wei Wuxian says number one. But, we know that Wei Wuxian, he likes to show off a little bit, and he's very proud, but he's probably also right. He's somebody who's very, very skillful. So I believe him when he says that he's number one. And also we know that he's the head disciple. So we know that among the disciples, he's definitely number one. And I think that, Chang Cheng is definitely jealous about that. The fact that he can do, he doesn't have to work as hard because he's obviously has a lot of ability and he's has a lot of skill. And he's still better than Chang Cheng. So that is, an interesting, not a big thing that we have in the novel, but I think a little bit indication of even now there are some parts of Chang Cheng that are not happy with Wei Wuxian. That's what I'm trying to say. Then we have when it was mentioned that Cloud Recesses was populated only by beautiful people, which is interesting because isn't Sushai is Sushai supposed to be good looking? That is a good question because I thought the actor who plays Sushai, I thought he was alright. At some stages when I even thought that he was good looking, at some points, not all the time, but at some points I thought, yeah, I can see it. But it's still, I don't know. But interesting that they only accept beautiful people. I don't think I would have been accepted in Cloud Recesses, sadly. Another thing, we have mention of the rules from, the Lang clan. And I always felt a little bit rude how against the rules of Cloud Recesses they all are. Obviously, they are all teenagers. Like, that is something that it should be heavily taken into account. But I would say if you're invited to someone's house and they said, well, in this house we do this, you are supposed to respect the rules, just to be polite. Like, I don't know. I think maybe because this is seen not so much as being invited to someone's house, but rather going to school. And I feel like teenagers are, more likely to break school rules. But I don't know. To me, it seems very rude because they are going there for free. I assume. I assume that they are not. They are not paying cloud recesses to go to this place. They are going there for free. They are offered this opportunity to have the classes. Like, the least you can do is respect the rules. So I don't know. And also the rules are not. Yeah, some of them are crazy. Or not crazy, but, a little bit weird. But most of them seem pretty reasonable. Like, I don't know. To me, the different rules seem to indicate that the lands are just socially awkward people and they need to regulate every aspect of their lives as a way to cope. But again, as I understand it, most of these rules, I think they're very common in monasteries and among monks. And that's something that we're going to talk later, because this is also brought up later, the connection between, monastic life and the lands. But, again, I feel like, in terms of the rules, I think the lands get a bad rap, but I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. And again, teenagers are rude. You wouldn't just go to somebody's house and do whatever you like. You'd respect the rules of the house. I think. Maybe not a lot of people see it like that. It also comes to me like how, not related to rules, related to Lang Wangji, how lonely he must have been, because he doesn't seem to. Obviously, he has a relationship with his uncle, his brother, but he doesn't seem to have a relationship with his peers. And we are going to see a lot of the time in this. Essentially, Lang Wangji came in, going about and seeing other people, especially talking about him, not very flatteringly, I have to say. I don't know. It seems like obviously he's somebody he's not a social butterfly. I think he's an introvert. I don't think he's someone who would enjoy having like a huge group of friends, but I think that maybe hearing other people talking about him like that is definitely something that is, I don't know, is not something that will make him very happy. I can guess. And then we have that even from a young age, Wei Wuxian can help to admire Lang Wangji. Like, he completely, like, he criticizes a lot, but I would say that he balances out about how much he praises him as well. And it's interesting how much Lang Wangji is like a magnet for him. It's like he just can't help himself getting close to him. And I think personally that at this stage is because maybe he sees the other boy as a challenge, especially how easily Wei Wuxian make friends with the rest of the students. And we're going to see that also the rest of the students really admire him and, they take him like a reference among them. So Wei Wuxian maybe, is used to that. He's used to make friends easily. He's used to having people admire him. So having this boy who he sees as somebody who's equal to him, at least in terms of, his level of, his level of skill. He's something that is equal. But at the same time, the fact that Lang Wangji just resists him so much, maybe he sees it a little bit as a challenge. And in the Untamed is something that is said that Wei Wuxian sees Lang Wangji as the only person in Cloud Recesses who is at his level. So, I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with that, but it's also interesting how focused as well Wei Wuxian is in his, in Lang Wangji's physical appearance. Like, again, I think we discussed it in the last video, how much, without noticing, without realizing, especially for someone who doesn't realize that maybe they are also attracted to men, how you can focus in this small details, and his lashes, how delicate they were. You can say he has nice lashes, but it feels like Wei Wuxian goes one step beyond. So it's interesting to see how, without noticing, you can see that maybe he's starting to be attracted to him. Maybe he doesn't understand that attraction, but there's definitely something there. And finally, we have Lan Qiren. I think Lan Qiren without a beard, he would probably be too powerful. Like, I would love to see that. It's something that, again, he's young. We know he's relatively young. We know he's definitely good looking because, he's a Lan. They don't allow bad people, bad looking people there. I would love to see Lan Qiren without a beard, but I feel like nobody will respect him. I feel like that aura that he expressed to others of him being older, of him, being strict and all that, he's somebody who maybe wasn't interested in having relations with other people. He just wants to teach. He just wants to have his books. He's somebody who's very academically minded. So maybe this is something that he put out to, have other people avoid him because he doesn't want them, he doesn't want other people to bother him. But also, can you imagine if you have, having a good looking teacher is, it's nice because it makes you want to go to class, but at the same time, some kind of focuses. Like, whatever comes out of their mouths, it doesn't matter. So I feel that he feels that he needs that goatee. He needs that goatee. He needs to appear older. He needs to be strict. I don't know, but I'd love to see Lan Qiren without a beard. And that's pretty much the end of chapter 13. So, chapter 14 starts with Lan Wangji answering the question in a monotone voice and essentially offering 3 steps to the problem, to solving the problem that his uncle had posed. And he says, first liberate, second suppress, third eliminate. Everybody was really relieved that he had answered because now obviously it meant that they wouldn't have to. And Lan Qiren was also very pleased with this answer. Lan Qiren also makes a comment about people becoming complacent and proud and they bringing disgrace upon themselves sooner or later. And as you can imagine, Wei Wuxian took it personally. So he decides to be a little troll and offer a 4th possibility, which essentially boils down to using the resourceful energy to fight the problem. Lan Qiren was not happy with this suggestion. He says Lan Qiren was so angered that his goatee was quivering. That's how that's how you measure how angry he is. You just have to look at the goatee. So he shouted, "How dare you!" And he throws Wei Wuxian several books. That is... it is what it is. So after some discussion and after some books being thrown, he ends up also throwing Wei Wuxian out of the classroom, which actually he's quite happy about. And I didn't go too much into the points that they make, like why Lan Qiren thinks that what he says wrong, like what arguments Wei Wuxian does. I'm going to comment that later when I finished the chapter. But I would say that, they're both good points. They both have good points, in my opinion. So, now that Wei Wuxian doesn't have to be in the classroom, he essentially just wanders around cloud recesses. And when classes finishes, his brother and Nihua-san, I assume like a whole group of people, they'd find him sitting on top of a tall wall. And Nihua-san wonders why Lan Qiren seems so strict towards Wei Wuxian, since he started, like, I can understand him being strict. So, well, I guess maybe he heard what he did with the alcohol. But at this point, I have to think that maybe he already knows who his mother is, and that's why he's being like that. And Nihua-san, with an expression of envy and yearning, he says how great it would be to be able to use resentful energy like that, since forming a core is so difficult, especially for him. I think at some point we find out that he formed his core fairly late, and that is something that we are told now that it is not very well regarded for cultivators to, for someone from a prominent sect to form their core at a later age. However, Nihua-san wasn't too bothered. He wasn't too ashamed. And Wei Wuxian says that no harm comes from using resentful energy. And Chang Chen warns him that that is something that is fine to talk about, like it's fine to discuss theoretically, but not something that it should be done. And Wei Wuxian assures him that it's just an idea, that he has no intention of doing it. And then he uses a very interesting expression. He says, "Why would I leave the nice broad road and walk on a single plank bridge on a dark narrow river instead?" Which again, if for those who have seen The Untamed, that is a very interesting phrase. And Wei Wuxian then invites the other students to hang pheasants with him, but it turns out that he won't be able to, since Lan Qiren have left him some punishment, the punishment of copying rules. Wei Wuxian was not amused by this, and he says the following, and again, the dramatic irony. "I'm not from the Lan sect, and I don't intend to marry into the Lan clan, so why should I copy the sect rules of this sect? I'm not gonna copy." Which, again, interesting, but also rude, because you are in the Lan, you are a guest in the Lan clan. The least you can do is do as they tell you, follow the rules, but okay. So Nihua-san offers to copy for him, but Wei Wuxian, tells him that he must want something in return. So Nihua-san is about to tell him when Lan Wangji appears, and essentially coldly stares down at them in disapproval, which is pretty much all we get from Lan Wangji in these few chapters. Wei Wuxian, he didn't care about Lan Wangji's disapproval. He just jumped down and gravitated, and that is the word that is used, towards him, calling his name. And Lan Wangji was not having this. He wasn't accepting any openings for friendship at this time. So he just turned around and walked away. Wei Wuxian was not ready to let him go, so he started to follow him, but Lan Wangji was so fast that he disappeared without a trace. So, I don't know. That is a very interesting image. Wei Wuxian was very disappointed at being ignored, and Nihua-san told him that Lan Wangji must really hate him if he was being so impolite, because I assumed that the least you can do was just saying hello or something like that. But Wei Wuxian only wanted to apologize to him, according to him anyway. And Chang Chang tells him that Lan Wangji probably thinks that Wei Wuxian is evil and unruly, and that's why he doesn't want to pay attention to him. To which Wei Wuxian says, again, very interesting, "Who cares if he ignored me? Does he look pretty?" After a thought, he realized that Lan Wangji did look pretty. Out of nowhere. Like, what does this have to do with everything? But there we go. After 3 days, Wei Wuxian discovers that Lan Qiren's lessons were not only long and boring, but everything was tested. As the date of the test grew near, Nihua-san was working very hard. And by working very hard, I mean copying lies for Wei Wuxian, so hoping that Wei Wuxian will let him copy from his test. Which, don't work hard, work smart, I guess. And again, interesting that we started to see these more devious aspects of Nihua-san. Very interesting. So apparently, if his grade was lower than a Yi, and this is something that is explained in the notes of the chapter, it says that the E is like a B, the equivalent of a B, Nima Jue would break his legs. Well, they were caught. They were caught copying. Lan Qiren exploded with anger and wrote to their respective clans. I can imagine Nim Jue was not happy about this, and apparently he thought Wei Wuxian was being a bad influence on all of the students, which is, just hilarious. And he says, as he had expected, and this is from Lan Qiren, this is what Lan Qiren thinks, as he had expected, Wei Yin was one of the biggest threats to humanity. I mean, okay. Maybe. And again, at this stage, he's just a student. Like, he hasn't done anything. But I don't know. I find Lan Qiren very funny. Honestly, Shang Fengmian, he wasn't very concerned about this. Like, when Lan Qiren wrote to him, he wasn't too bothered. But Wei Wuxian was punished again, and this time Nihua-san couldn't copy for him because there would be someone watching as they copy, or as he copy. I think we can guess who that person is. So we move right away to the next scene, and they are in the library pavilion. Wei Wuxian is copying lines, and he's sharing a desk with Lang Wenji. But obviously, Wei Wuxian gets bored and he starts staring him, because again, who wouldn't? If you have Lang Wenji in front of you, I guess you might as well stare. He says that a lot of girls in Yumen envy him from coming to cloud recesses to study with Lang Wenji, and now that he could look at him properly, he could say that he was definitely beautiful. Again, so much focusing on how good looking Lang Wenji is, as it should. But there is a big but. This beauty was ruined by his bitter expression. That Lang Wenji was, Lang Wenji at this point, he was also copying something, but in his case, he was copying some ancient books. And Wei Wuxian could not help but compliment his handwriting. Lang Wenji, he didn't care. He remained indifferent. And now we know that this is a recipe for disaster. Wei Wuxian being ignored, and especially being ignored by Lang Wenji, is something that he cannot accept, especially if he's also bored. So God knows what he's going to do, but that is the end of the chapter. That is how the chapter ends. So let's talk about some of the things that happen in this, and let's start with the discussion between Lan Qiren and Wei Wuxian about the different points that they make for and against resentful energy. Obviously, I don't know anything about cultivation, so I don't know how, I'm not sure if my knowledge is not enough to have a very certain opinion about this. But first of all, we have that, with the first liberate, second suppress, third eliminate, Wei Wuxian feels that when liberation is not possible, that is a waste not to use the untapped potential of the energy to your advantage. And that is a very good point. Lan Qiren, however, seems to be more worried about balance between, I guess, not negative energy and resentful energy, and also being able to do it safely, which is also another, it makes a lot of sense. I think he makes a good point. I'm also guessing that there must be some kind of ethical dilemma about using spirits that way, especially if you're if you force spirits to do what you want, Again, I don't know anything about cultivation, so maybe I'm very wrong. But I think that the idea, obviously, you have two parts about dealing with a spirit. On the one hand, the best thing to do is to liberate it for the spirit itself, because I'm guessing that for a spirit itself, it's better to liberate. However, if they become a problem for the people who are alive, then if liberation is not possible, then you have to prioritize the people that are alive and suppress it or eliminate. However, if you use this spirit's resentful energy, aren't you forcing them to do what you want? I'm not guessing that you asked for consent. Can a spirit consent about doing things? I don't know. Maybe this is very stupid, what I'm saying. Maybe my concept of a spirit is very Western, and I don't completely understand the concept of spirit that they are dealing with here. But to me, I would say, especially in the Untamed, I would say that his position, Wei Wuxian's position, was presented as more or less fine. Why don't we do that? And they never present arguments against it that are completely, that end up being completely, how can I say this? I forgot to speak English. They never present arguments that completely counteract this position. Because in the show, pretty much Lan Qiren just gets mad and throws him out. They never present good arguments. And then, yes, Lang Wenji is worried about what using these energies is doing to Wei Wuxian, but I guess we never actually see him suffering the consequence of this, so we never see a real argument against using resentful energy. And I think Lan Qiren is making, and this is not just because I like Lan Qiren, I think Lan Qiren is making good points, and I think he's right to be concerned. I think he's right into thinking that, about thinking about balance, about, resentful and non-resentful energy, also about the safety of doing this, about the ethical problems. I don't know. I would say that this argument is not as one-sided as it might seem, especially if you watch The Untamed. In any case, I get the impression that this is not something that Wei Wuxian had been planning particularly. This is not something like his long-lost dream of using resentful energy. He obviously is something that he had considered before. Like, I don't think this is something that he came about at that moment, or maybe he did. What I would say is that at this stage, I think he's just using this as a way to troll Lan Qiren. I don't think he's actually saying it seriously or seriously considering using resentful energy or even seriously advocating for using resentful energy. I think he was just being a troll, and that's it. Then we have some interesting insight into Ni Huasan. On the one hand, we have this, how he talks about using resentful energy. And this is interesting, especially consider what we know. I mean, again, I don't know how this is going to be portrayed here in the novel. But what I know about the Ni clan from The Untamed and their type of cultivation, it's interesting that he, thinks about resentful energy. So I do wonder if he already knows about, that thing that happens to the Ni clan with their sabers and their saber spirit, or if he's just actually thinking as something to make it easy for him to, cultivate, essentially. Because obviously something, Ni Huasan is not very good at cultivating. We know that his core formed later. We know that maybe he's not even very interested in cultivation. So that maybe he's just doing it to satisfy his brother. But, obviously finding a loophole, it would be great for him. And we have seen, especially in this chapter, we have already seen him, taking shortcuts, like offering to copy for Wei Wuxian as a way for him to let him copy from his test. So I don't know. I feel like we are seeing like small little details about Ni Huasan that are very interesting if you consider his story in the rest of the novel. Then we have this phrase, why would I leave the nice broad road and walk on a single plank bridge on a dark narrow river instead? That alone should tell you that if Wei Wuxian would have had any other choice about using resentful energy, that he wouldn't have chosen the path that he chose. That it wasn't something that he was considering really. It was something that he was thinking about, like, theoretically, but it was more as a way to challenge what was traditional and, especially challenge Lan Qiren, rather than him actually considering something that he wanted to do and he was considering doing. Which I think it tells you a lot about his character. And on the other hand, you have to compare how, I don't know if this is a phrase that is going to come out again in the novel, but if you have seen The Untamed, you know that it does. You know that this is pretty much in the novel. This is not in the novel. In The Untamed, this is used in probably one of the best moments in the show as a way to, as a way to express what Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian are feeling, especially what especially for Lan Wangji is feeling for Wei Wuxian. So I thought it was interesting that this phrase is here. I don't know if they take it from here and they use it later in The Untamed, or if it's something that it also happens in here. I hope it does, because that scene is absolutely great. And then we have also the dichotomy of Wei Wuxian disliking Lan Wangji, but not being able to help himself in complimenting him, in being around him, in wanting Lan Wangji to pay attention to him. And again, it feels like obviously they just met, but I feel like in a way he's attracted to Lan Wangji, but he's not aware that he's attracted. Like, he doesn't know what he's feeling, essentially. He just acts. And that is very common with teenagers. Teenagers do that a lot. But it's just very interesting. You get those moments where Lan Wangji, when we have Wei Wuxian's perspective and he describes Lan Wangji, and he describes in a way that he's definitely paying a lot of attention to the details of Lang Wangji, and that's all I'm going to say. And that's pretty much the end of chapter 14. So, moving to chapter 15. And at the beginning of this chapter, we are told that Wei Wuxian was good at finding his own fun in these situations. And since he didn't have anything else to play with, he was going to play with Lang Wangji, which, of course, he would. And he started by calling Lang Wangji different versions of his name, going from the more formal to the most informal one, which is Lang Chan, which at this point, when he calls him Lang Chan, is when Lang Wangji stops writing and turns his attention to Wei Wuxian finally. And before Lang Wangji's cold stare, he justified himself by saying that he only did it because Lang Wangji was just not answering. He wasn't paying any attention to him. And Lang Wangji just asked Wei Wuxian to put his legs down because obviously he was apparently sitting with his legs sprawled all over the table. And, this was apparently bothering Lang Wangji, and it probably bothered me too. So he put them down, but then he inched his body forward, still sitting in an unacceptable position, but also a lot closer to Lang Wangji. So he asks Lang Wangji if he really hates him. But Lang Wangji doesn't answer, so he just keeps talking. He tells him that he shouldn't have done what he have done, that, that he made a mistake doing it, that he wouldn't do it again, in front of him anyway, and that he truly didn't know about the rules. And, so far so good. He, as a way to apology, okay, it was fine. But then he continues saying that it was actually Lang Wangji's fault, for attacking him instead of talking to him. And Lang Wangji keeps ignoring him, and he keeps trying to catch his attention, which is the story of this guy's relationship. Lang Wangji, however, refuses to accept this apology because he believes, quite rightfully, and I believe it, that Wei Wuxian actually feels no remorse about it. But Wei Wuxian insists that he is actually sorry and offers to kneel down, which, okay then, fine. No comment. That makes Lang Wangji put his brush down, which Wei Wuxian thinks he finally got a reaction. But no, Lang Wangji had just put silencing spell of him and continued working on his copying. And Wei Wuxian is obviously mad about this and reacts by writing messages to Lang Wangji and throwing them at Lang Wangji, in paper balls. But Lang Wangji just said he was pathetic and only removed the spell when he finished copying. So for several days, they follow the same routine. They copy. Wei Wuxian bothered Lang Wangji silenced him. He starts throwing things, paper balls at him, the whole thing. That is until the last day. The last day, Lang Wangji noticed that Wei Wuxian was acting different. Wei Wuxian normally, left his sword all over the place, but that day he brought it with him, and he even started copying without prompting. So he was acting obedient, which was strange. So Lang Wangji didn't have a reason to put the silence spell on him. And after a while, Wei Wuxian gave Lang Wangji a piece of paper. And at first, Lang Wangji thought that it was probably going to be one of those lame phrases, that Wei Wuxian had been sending him, but found that it was actually a drawing of himself. And seeing that Lang Wangji was actually paying attention to Wei Wuxian, to the drawing, Wei Wuxian smiled, and Lang Wangji said, "You have spare time, yet you scribble instead of copy the text. In my opinion, the day of your release from this punishment will never come." But Wei Wuxian has already finished copying and told him that he wouldn't be back the next day. So he pushed the drawing back, telling him to keep it. The drawing fell and Lang Wangji didn't take it. Wei Wuxian said that he had forgotten to add something, so he picked it up and added a few strokes. And when Lang Wangji looked, he just started laughing. Wei Wuxian started laughing. Lang Wangji finally put the book down and saw that what he had added was a flower at the side of his head. The corners of his lip seemed to have twitched slightly. And, Wei Wuxian is saying, like, you know, do you still think this is pathetic? Well, maybe instead of saying just pathetic, you can say something else. You can add more words to it, which he does. He actually said that this is extremely pathetic. And it turns out that this was all a ruse. It was all a trick, because as soon as Lang Wangji picked the book that he was reading, he was faced not by the Buddhist text that he had been reading, but by a pornographic book. And it was very obvious who was responsible, since Wei Wuxian didn't even bother to cover it up. He just started laughing hysterically. And Lang Wangji obviously just threw the book to the ground. He seems to be escaping from the book, and it says like he was escaping from snakes and scorpions. So he was shook. He's just shaken. He could. I can imagine Lang Wangji in this situation. So obviously Lang Wangji went for his sword. And now it's evident why Wei Wuxian had brought his, like he knew that this was a possibility, but he still didn't pull his out completely. He just did it partially and then reminded Lang Wangji of his manners and where he was, because obviously fighting was forbidden inside of Cloud Recesses, but also I'm guessing inside of the library pavilion. And Lang Wangji essentially called him shameless, to which Wei Wuxian responded that he doesn't need to be ashamed of this, and that if he says that he had never seen one before, he won't believe him, meaning that he doesn't believe that Lang Wangji, you know, had never seen a pornographic book, which I don't know. And Lang Wangji tells him to go outside to fight, and Wei Wuxian reminds me that fighting is still prohibited in Cloud Recesses, not only in, you know, the library. And Wei Wuxian saw him grab the book, possibly to show as evidence of what he had done. And then he started to tease him, like, are you really, you know, he started to tease, like, are you really going to take it? Like, now that you have seen my porn, you have become my friend, we can exchange opinions. And Lang Wangji's whole face turned white. And he spoke one word at a time, like, I will not read it. I will not read it. But Wei Wuxian kept teasing him, like, oh, you're going to keep it a secret, and you know that I borrowed it from someone else, and what are you going to do? Are you going to show it to your elders? Are you actually going to show pornography to your elders? And they will definitely think that you read it. But Lang Wangji, he was beside himself. So what he did was actually destroy the book completely, which is exactly what Wei Wuxian wanted. He wanted to be no evidence of what he did. So Wei Wuxian thought if he kept pushing Lang Wangji's buttons, eventually Lang Wangji would lose it and he would destroy it, which he was quite right. And, you know, Wei Wuxian just kept teasing him until he literally came at him with a sword. At this point, this is when he ran away from Lang Wangji. And, you know, not only did Lang Wangji throw him out, but he also told him to get lost, which is a great moment. Outside, there was a group of people waiting for him, and obviously they already knew what he was going to do. So, you know, they already knew about the prank that he was going to pull, because the moment he leaves, they ask him, like, how did it go? And Wei Wuxian was very proud of being the first to get that reaction from Lang Wangji, or getting Lang Wangji to tell him to get out, piss off, whatever he said. For his part, Chang Cheng wasn't happy. He thought that Wei Wuxian's actions brought shame to the Qiang sect. And that's pretty much the chapter. This is a pretty short chapter. We have just the events of Wei Wuxian pulling this prank on Lang Wangji. And it's interesting how much of Wei Wuxian's behavior is very similar to, you know, the typical image that we have of a boy pulling a girl's pigtails when they are little. That's pretty much what I feel Wei Wuxian's behavior is. Like him wanting to get close to Lang Wangji, but Lang Wangji being so indifferent that he doesn't know how to approach him. So the only way he can get Lang Wangji's to pay attention to him is by doing that. And, he just doesn't know how to express his interest, even if it's not romantic. It's like he doesn't know how to interact with Lang Wangji in the same way that he does with the other boys. Like the other boys, he find easy to interact. But with Lang Wangji, I feel like he doesn't know how to go about it. In terms of Lang Wangji, I do believe that he had never seen a pornographic book. That I fully believe. I don't think he had ever seen one. And I like how the plan, how much, you have to admit that Wei Wuxian is very smart. How he planned to make Lang Wangji so mad that he would destroy it. Which I think, obviously, it shows how devious it can be, but devious in the sense of planning, like how he can plan something like that. But also, on the other hand, it shows how he is starting to get to know Lang Wangji, or at least how he would react to certain things. So he knows that if he push Lang Wangji's buttons enough, that this is the reaction that he would get. And I find that very interesting, especially if you compare it with the Lang Wangji of the present in the story, and how Wei Wuxian is trying to keeping, he's trying to get Lang Wangji to expel him, to throw him out of cloud recesses. So he's acting, shameless. He's acting flirtatious. He's breaking the rules. And he thinks he knows Lang Wangji. He thinks he knows how he's going to react to this, and how Lang Wangji surprises him and acts in a completely different way. Because obviously 13 years have gone by, and Lang Wangji had managed in those 13 years, I think, to come to terms with a lot of things about, his personality, but also he's no longer a teenager, and the way you react when you're a teenager is just not the way that you react as an adult. So, and, you have to remember that Wei Wuxian know Lang Wangji as a teenager, pretty much. He doesn't know adult Lang Wangji. So that is also an interesting, comparison that you can get. And also how annoying, Wei Wuxian is. He's a little gremlin. Like, honestly, I love him, but he's so annoying. Like, especially, this is the typical, relationship between somebody who's very, extroverted and somebody who's very introverted, and just the extroverted, not that extroverted people are annoying. I'm an introverted, so, maybe, I'm thinking it from that perspective. But I'm not saying that all extroverted persons are annoying, but Wei Wuxian definitely is. So I don't know. I just find their dynamic very interesting. And as far as the rest of the chapter, this is it. There is it was a pretty short chapter, this one, and it didn't have a lot other than this whole situation. But still, I would say a pretty fun chapter anyway. So let's move on to chapter 16. And chapter 16 starts with Wei Wuxian thinking that he's going to be punished for what he did in the previous chapter, which is a fair assumption. So what he did is decide to sleep with his sword, because he thought that Lan Qiren and Lang Wangji were going to come to his room at night and drag him out of bed. And I assuming that he thought he was going to fight against them because of that. However, this never happened. And something of note in this is the fact that he calls Lan Qiren and Lang Wangji Old Fatty Daddy and Little Fatty Daddy, which I think is hilarious. So the punishment never happens. No one comes to drag him out of his room. And the next morning, he finds out that actually Lan Qiren wasn't even in cloud recesses, that he had gone for a discussion conference, and for the next 2 days, they were not going to have classes. Shang Chen, who is always a beacon of positivity in this novel, reminded him that even if he wasn't punished the day before, he will still get punished when he comes back. Wei Wuxian decides not to worry. Like, you know what? I'll worry about it eventually when it happens. Now I'm not going to worry. I'm going to just relax. And he decides to go hunt pheasants. Not just him, but actually him, Chang Cheng, and Ni Huasan. As they were leaving, Wei Wuxian stopped on his tracks and exclaimed that there were 2 Lanshans. And when they see that there is in fact two Langshans in front of them. The only difference is that one of them had a very stern expression and the other one looked very gentle. And for those who already know, because we've already been reading this novel, we know that in fact there are no two Langshans, although I bet Wei Wuxian will love that. There is actually one Langshan and one Lang Xishen. And I have to admit, when I first read this, I was a little bit confused because I kind of thought like there is a very similar situation in, I think, one of the previous two chapters where they see Lang Wangji with his brother, and they talk about how similar they are and all of that. So it's like, but we already have this. And then I remember that this is taking place in the past, and this is the first time Wei Wuxian is actually seeing Lang Xishen, I assume, or at least Lang Xishen and Lang Wangji together. So anyway, they meet these two guys. Lang Wangji obviously is glaring at Wei Wuxian. Lang Xishen is all smiles, so they introduce themselves. Lang Xishen had apparently seen Ni Huasan's brother not so long ago, and his brother was asking about Ni Huasan's studies and whether he was going to pass that year, which Ni Huasan didn't seem really convinced. Wei Wuxian asked the brothers where they were going, and Lang Xishen says that they are going to exterminate a water ghoul. Is that how you pronounce it? I should have checked the pronunciation of this, before this, but I'm going with ghoul, a water ghoul. Lang Wangji was having none of this conversation. He doesn't want Wei Wuxian close to him. He doesn't want to, just interacted with Wei Wuxian is too much for him. So he told his brother that the small talk that was happening here, it was unnecessary. They would just leave. So let's just stop this, ignore these people, let's just go. But it was too late. Wei Wuxian was already interested. He heard water ghoul and he says, this is my thing. So he asked Lang Xishen to take them along, to go with them. To which Lang Xishen smiled, but Lang Wangji immediately said that it was against the rules. Says, there's no way you're coming with us. Despite Lang Wangji many objections, though, Lang Xishen was all for it. And since Chang Cheng and Wei Wuxian had plenty of experience with water ghouls and didn't have classes, so he very easily agreed, because apparently in Newman there is a lot of water, so there's obviously a lot of water ghouls to deal with, so they had the experience. In the meantime, having been reminded of his brother, Ni Huasan forgot all about having fun and decided to go study and review, because things were not going well for him. So Wei Wuxian and Chang Cheng leave to prepare, whatever they have to do to prepare to go to this adventure. So Lang Wangji asked his brother why he agreed for them to come. And he first said that the two boys are well known in Yumeng, so they probably know what they're talking about. Like, they do know how to deal with water ghouls and all of that. And Lang Wangji, for this, he said nothing. But he clearly expressed with his face that he didn't agree with this. The other reason is that Lang Xishen noticed that Lang Wangji wanted Wei Wuxian to go as well. He said, I only agree because you look as if you wanted the head disciple of sect leader Xiang to come with you, which is, one hell of a read for Lang Xishen. And this shocked Lang Wangji. He obviously denies it. I'm betting that he's cursing his face, like, how the hell did he read that? But it was too late. They were coming. Wei Wuxian and Chang Cheng were coming with them. So they all took off to deal with this water ghost, and we have some information about Kaishi Town, especially focused on the fact that apparently people in this place have a different, they call it a different voice, I think, or something like that, which I assume it means that they have a different accent. They speak with a different accent, and is described as being very soft and gentle. And, they are going with the boats. Essentially, the whole group took some boats and made their way to whatever the water ghouls were, on some lake, whatever. And apparently Lang Xishen had been there before, and he had caught a dozen of them. And he also, it says, he caught a dozen of them. He cleaned the corpses, he carried them to the nearby part of town, only to find that some of the corpses were not familiar to any of the local people. So it's very good. A very good thing that Lan Xishan did, but obviously it didn't solve the problem. Wei Wuxian found this strange, since water ghouls are pretty particular about where they stay. They usually stay where they drown, so if you died in a place, that's where the water ghoul is going to stay. And Lan Xishan agrees and said that that's why he wanted to bring Lan Wangji with him, and I assume other disciples, because evidently he saw that it was a bigger problem that he could deal with. Then there's some discussion about the methods of hunting these guys. Obviously, Wei Wuxian has a lot of experience with them and has a lot to say. I'm not going to go too much into it, but, discussion is had about this. After a while, Wei Wuxian looks at Lan Wangji's boat, especially at the bottom of it, and then he called him out. When Lan Wangji looked at him, he splashed some water with his paddle, and to avoid it, Lan Wangji just jumps out of his boat into another boat and called Wei Wuxian pathetic, in typical Lan Wangji fashion. However, Lan Wangji used his paddle to tip, Wei Wuxian used the paddle to tip the boat Lan Wangji had been using, and when the boat turned around, what they saw were 3 water ghouls clinging to it, to the bottom of it. And these guys are disgusting. Like, the descriptions of these things in this book, it's absolutely disgusting. Lan Xishan asked Wei Wuxian, how did he know that they were there? Like, how could you guess that was happening? So what he says is that he looked at the boat, essentially, he gives a whole explanation, but what he says essentially is that he looked at Lan Wangji's boat and he thought it looked heavier, since it was only carrying one person, especially in comparison to the other boats that were carrying more people. And that's how he thought that maybe there was something dragging him from the bottom. And Lan Xishan praised him for this, but Wei Wuxian went directly to Lan Wangji. And he wanted to explain why he had splashed him and didn't say anything. And essentially, the reason why he did this is because the water ghouls apparently are very smart, and if he had said anything, they would just have gone away. Like, they would have known what he was planning and just, not appeared or, just disappeared, because apparently they're very clever. So what he did his whole trick so he would take them by surprise. However, in typical Lan Wangji fashion, he ignored Wei Wuxian. Like, he doesn't exist. I bet that is Lan Wangji's mantra is like, no, there is no such thing. At this point, anyway, Wei Wuxian doesn't exist. He's not there. It's just nothing. There's nothing in front of me. Wei Wuxian, as usual, he finds Lan Wangji ignoring him completely unacceptable. And it's all very cute. Like, he tells them, you're not paying attention to me, I'm here to help, why are you so gloomy, etc., etc. It's adorable. And especially when Wei Wuxian tells him that he was trying to apologize, and Lan Wangji remembered the last time he tried to apologize. If we remember in the previous chapter, there was a pornographic book involved. So that gives even less credit to him talking and more reason for Lan Wangji to completely ignore him. So at this point, the more water ghouls appear and they deal with them, and these prawns, they take their swords out, they do whatever it is that they do with their swords and water ghouls. There is more description in the book. I'm not going to go into the fights. They fight, that's it. And at this point, Lan Wangji noticed Wei Wuxian's word and he asked him about it. So he asked what the name of the word is. And here we have this whole play of words that is a little bit lost at least in this novel. I don't know how it was translated in the official version, in the official translation, because in this one, they don't translate the name of the word, they use Suibian. And obviously this whole scene, it has to be explained for, to get the joke. But essentially, Wei Wuxian's sword is called Suibian, which means whatever. So when, Lan Wangji asked him about what's the name of his sword, he said Suibian, which is whatever, and Lan Wangji, doesn't understand. It's like, what do you mean? It's called whatever. And he says, yeah, whatever. And Lang Wangji is like, you can't call it that. I can't call it whatever I like because, it's a sword that has a spirit. It's disrespectful to call it like that. And then Wei Wuxian is like, no, it's actually the name, Sui Bian. And he shows him like the name engraved in the sword. It's like, this sword is actually called Sui Bian, whatever. And Lang Wangji at this is at loss of words. He doesn't know what to say, but it is hilarious. I loved it. And then we have why it's called Sui Bian, which is essentially that when he was given the sword, he didn't know what to call him. He had a lot of names in mind, but eventually couldn't decide. So when his uncle Xiang asked him what he's going to call the sword, he essentially told him, to call it whatever, whatever you want. So this meant that Uncle Xiang should decide on the name. But eventually what turns out is that the sword is actually called whatever. That's the name that it was kept. Actually, I'm not sure if it was, in this part, I don't know. Sometimes the translation is a little bit difficult to understand. Because much later we get that Wei Wuxian actually chose on purpose the name whatever. But when he tells the story, to me, it sounds like he says whatever, like, whatever you like. It doesn't matter. The name is whatever. I think it was on purpose anyway. So he tells this story to Lang Wangji. Lang Wangji finds the whole thing ridiculous. He probably thinks Wei Wuxian is ridiculous as well. But Wei Wuxian is delighted at having tricked him. It's like, this is the reason why the sword is called whatever. So he can pull these tricks. However, their little chat is interrupted by a shadow coming towards the group. And that is the end of chapter 16. This is a chapter that has a lot of action, but on the whole, again, not a very long chapter. So let's talk a little bit about this chapter, about what happens in this chapter. So one of the first things that I found interesting in this chapter is the fact that Wei Wuxian thinks there is a possibility that Lan Qiren and Lang Wangji may appear into his room to drag him out to punish. Like, I don't doubt that they would have punished. Like, in this case, I don't think he was punished because I don't think, Lang Wangji said anything and then his uncle left and all of that. I think probably Lang Wangji was too embarrassed to punish him. So in any case, he wouldn't have been punished. But the fact that he thinks there is a possibility that Lang Wangji and Lan Qiren were going to drag him out of the room, I find that interesting because, we know how Wei Wuxian was raised, and we know who raised him. So I'm wondering if this is not something that Madame Xu would do. Madame Yu? Yeah, Madame Yu. If Madame Yu wouldn't do, like, if she wouldn't, maybe not something that she did, but maybe something that he thought he was capable. The kind of punishments that he was getting in Lotus Pier maybe led him to believe that he might have been punished in that way here. But again, I think if he was punished, like, they would have waited for the next day. I don't think they would have dragged him out of bed. But I don't know. I think maybe it's more like a funny detail, but I don't know. The other thing is this thing with Nihue-san. And it's interesting that when Nihue-san talks to Lan Xishen, he calls him brother Xishen instead of, Sebu Jun, which is what everybody calls him who are not, very close to him. And I think this speaks a lot of the friendship that exists between Lan Xishen and Nimin Jue, that obviously there is that, there is already a pre-existing relationship, and there is already familiarity between them. And I find this interesting because, at least in the Untamed, we don't see a lot of, Lan Xishen and Nimin Jue together, although we can assume that they were friends. So it's nice to see these little details that tell us that at least before this, they were friends already. And then we also have Nihue-san. Like, how many times did he study at club recesses? First of all, if he studied many times, then we can assume that he's a little bit older than the others. because by what it says in here in the novel, I think, wait, let me look for the quote because I didn't have him. Where is it? It says something like, this year will be able to pass. So obviously he has studied at Cloud Recesses before. Like, poor Nihua-san. Really, the academics, or at least this aspect of the academics is definitely not something that he enjoys, I think. The other thing that I love about this chapter is Lang Wenji silently expressing things instead of talking, and how good Lan Xishen is reading these expressions. And obviously, you can tell that Lang Wenji is not a character that says a lot. If he doesn't have to talk, he's not going to talk. So a lot of what he expresses that way. And usually, because Wei Wuxian doesn't know Lang Wenji a lot, I feel that that's why we get the impression that he's very blank-faced, because Lang Wenji hasn't learned to read, like, his expressions, his, the way, he says things without saying anything. But obviously he does express things, without saying them, because Lan Xishen apparently is very good at reading them. And it's also interesting because normally the lands are so formal between them that it's more difficult to see a close relationship between them, especially if you compare to other close relationships between siblings in I haven't met that many siblings in this, but even in the show, in the Untamed, I think Lan Xishen and Lang Wenji, they still, they don't call each other like Xishen or even Lang Shan, like his brother doesn't call him Lang Shan. He always calls him Lang Shi. And I think, I'm pretty sure, I will have to check again, but I'm pretty sure Lang Wenji doesn't even call him Xishen. I think he calls him, older brother. I don't know. I don't remember what he called, but I think it was something that was sort of formal. It wasn't something that was completely informal like others that call them like a diminutive of the name, or not the diminutive, but, those sort of ways of addressing that are more, familiar. And I don't know, it always gets the impression that the lands are so formal with each other that sometimes it's difficult to see how close they are. But when you see this kind of thing, you see how well they can read each other and how well they know each other. You can tell there is a very strong relationship between them. And I love seeing it just because they are a little bit more formal, maybe because of the, the type of clan, the type of sect that they live, and the type of upbringing that they had. Maybe they're a little bit more formal with each other, and they don't have the kind of relationship that, even not compared it to the Yangs, because they definitely, if you compare it with Yan Li and, for a moment I forgot Wei Wuxian's name. You compare it with Yan Li and Wei Wuxian, definitely they have a sort of very close relationship. She actually calls him Ashian, and he calls her, I think, older sister or something like that. But if you compare it even with the Wens, they still call each other like a Ning or things like that. But again, I don't think that is because there isn't as much a strong bond as there is with the other relationship. It's just that they are a little bit more formal. I also love the fact that Lan Xishen absolutely loves trolling his younger brother, and so he should. Like, if you are an older brother, I think it's your God-given right to troll your little brother. So I love it. I love the fact it's like, really, because I thought you wanted him to come. So I told him yes, even though it was clear that I don't know if it was clear that Lang Wenji wanted him to come. I would say kind of the opposite. I think Lan Xishen kind of saw the opportunity of seeing like Wei Wuxian maybe teasing Lang Wenji, and that would be fun. So I think that's why he did it. But I don't know. But I really love what it says about the relationship in that part. Then we have what it says about Lan Xishen taking the corpses. When he went to hunt. I don't know if you hunt for water ghouls. I guess you do. You go night hunting, I guess. When he went for the corpses for the water ghouls, and he took the corpses out, and he says he took like a dozen of them, and he took them to the town to investigate. And it, I assume, was he alone? Like, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe he had some kind of cart or something to help him carry the corpses to the town. Maybe he had disciples with him that carry the corpses with him. But I'm going to be honest, I'm going to choose to believe that he was alone and he simply carried them, like put them all over a net and carried them all over his shoulder with his super strength that the lands are famous for. So I have no evidence for this, but that is the image that I'm going to go for. I don't care. If I didn't read any evidence against it, so that's what I'm going for. Once again, I'm also grateful for the Untamed not having the budget to make realistic zombies and ghosts and things like that, because again, every time they are described in the book, they are absolutely disgusting. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see, like, already in the Donghua, they are pretty disgusting. But in this, like the descriptions here, thank God we didn't have to see. Honestly, I don't know if it's budget problems. I assume that maybe a little bit both, or maybe also I don't know if because of censorship they are not allowed to show something a little bit more explicit. But the zombies in the Untamed, which I don't know if the puppets, I guess in the Untamed, they were hilarious. They were just guys with a bad haircut, and that was it. That is the kind of zombie that I want to see. That is the kind of zombie that I can deal with it easily. If it's something that I absolutely hate zombies. I'm terrified of them. I don't like them. So again, thank you, the Untamed, for not showing them to me, because I wouldn't have gone through an episode if the zombies were like that. The last thing that I'm going to mention is the fact that it surprises me a lot how much of the original dialogue they use for the Untamed, especially considering the changes. There is a lot of changes in terms of how the story develops and all of that, which is obvious. I mean, it's an adaptation, but there is so much of the dialogue, like, for example, the home conversation between Lang Wenji and Wei Wuxian with Sui Bian. There's so much of this that was kept, and I think so far, I think the adaptation is pretty, obviously there's going to be changes. It's impossible to put everything, especially when you have so many things to consider. Already a normal adaptation is difficult, but if you also have to be thinking about censorship and things like that, and how to adapt the whole story to a certain amount of episodes, it's difficult. But I think on the whole, they did a pretty good job so far. Maybe I'll change my opinion when I do the rest of the episodes. And that's pretty much it for chapter 16. So, on to chapter 17. And in chapter 17, we have pretty much a straight continuation to what was happening in chapter 16. They saw the shadow that was getting closer to them. And in this chapter, we start with a fight that happens between the cultivators and this underwater shadow. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the fight. It just happened. They are fighting. At some point, Su She sees Lang Wenji, who's sending his sword right into the water, and then it comes back. You know that trick that cultivators do, that they send the sword and then it comes back to their hand. And Su She sees this and decides that he's going to do the same. He's going to send his own sword. However, his sword doesn't come back, because apparently his sword and himself weren't as good as Bishen and Lang Wenji. And it says here, that he did it because he saw the second young master do it, and then he realized before he even finished speaking how unsuitable this sentence was. No matter what, the Bishen sword and Lang Wenji were not comparable to others. So, not a very good move from Su She. At some point, Lang Wenji attacks this black thing, this dark thing that was happening underwater, but only manages to cut like a piece of clothing. And Wei Wuxian teases him about it, saying, this is my first time seeing someone remove a water ghoul's clothing when they are catching water ghouls, which, Wei Wuxian, he's teasing. And At this point, they actually realized that the whole thing, this whole dark thing, was actually clothing. That's why it was so difficult to attack it, because they just sent the swords and the swords went right through it, and it did cut nothing. It was very difficult to, do anything about it. They also realized that whatever this was, it led them to the center of the Bilin Lake on purpose. And at this point, water started to get into the boats. Like, the boats were not usable for a long time. And not only that, but the water in the lake became completely black, which again, terrifying. Suddenly, a whirlpool formed in the middle of the lake, right where they were, and everybody mounted their swords, because, we have to remember that these guys can fly. However, Suchet didn't have a sword, so he didn't mount anything. He was there in a boat that was very quickly sinking, right next to a whirlpool that was pretty much eating everything, so he was screwed. Wei Wuxian went to help him, and the whirlpool that was there seemed pretty interested in Suchet, which is interesting. Like, bad taste, but, And he started to pull both of them in, because obviously Wei Wuxian was in his sword trying to drag Suchet up, trying to, pull him out of whatever he was, but the whirlpool was just pulling him down. And because Wei Wuxian's sword wasn't as strong, apparently Wei Wuxian's sword, he was very fast, but it wasn't very strong, he just couldn't pull him up. So he was there, just trying to save this guy, but being unable to. At this point, Shang Chen, who he was, on his own world, on his own sword, floating, he came down to where Wei Wuxian is, and apparently just to berate him, just to tell him off, because he definitely doesn't help. He doesn't do anything. He just, says like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Maybe to help this guy, but no, Shang Chen doesn't do anything. Wei Wuxian reaches the point that he knows that it's either letting go Suchet, because obviously he was sinking him down, or, sinking with him. So he says, like, if nobody helps him, then he's just going to let go. And, at this stage, Shang Chen is right there. What the hell? But, let's leave that to the side. At this point, he feels something grabbing him by the collar and pulling him up. So what this is essentially Lan Wangji, who is in his sword, and this is what it says. He and his sword carried the weight of 3 people and fought with a mysterious fort on the lake at the same time. Like, my God, what a man. And there is also a comment that Shang Chen sees this happening and he's rather shocked, because he thought that if he did the same, he probably wouldn't have been able to ascend as quickly. He wouldn't have been able to do the same thing. And Lan Wangji was around the same age as him. So, an interesting little tidbit that we're going to talk later. And Wei Wuxian obviously is going to say, oh, Lan Shan, your sword is so strong, all of that. And also is going to say that he doesn't like being grabbed, by the collar like a kitten. He doesn't say like the kitten, but that is the image that I have. And he asks Lan Wangji to grab his hand. Well, Lan Wangji denies. He says, no, because I don't like physical contact. I don't like touching other people. But Wei Wuxian says that they're already familiar with each other. Like, we are already friends. There is no, I'm not other people. Lan Wangji says, we are not familiar. I don't know what kind of delusion you're living, but you are not familiar. So they live like that. They live with Lan Wangji just grabbing Wei Wuxian by the collar. And it turns out that the thing that was in the lake was something called a waterborne abyss. So we have kind of an explanation what a waterborne abyss is, and here's what it says. It says that when there is a lot of drownings and a lot of sinking ships and all of that, in the same place, like that water develops a sort of personality and gets used to being fed these lives, I guess. So when this stops happening, they stop receiving lives, or when they want more than they are receiving, they become this thing that starts taking lives on its own. And the thing is that people in Keiji, that is where they are pretty good with water. So there are not that many drownings, which means that the abyss wasn't actually born there, but it was actually moved there. And not only that, but it's also pretty difficult to get rid of. To get rid of it, you have to take all of the water from the lake or whatever it is, every single drop, and then you have to take all of the people and goods that have sunk there, like the boats and all of that, and then the riverbed has to be exposed to the sunlight for a few years, which seems a lot of work to get this thing. So definitely something that is very difficult to do. And it bears the question, like, what is it doing there? Like, why it didn't appear there, so where is it coming from? And it says that obviously it was moved there by someone, and obviously who could be this someone but the Wen clan? And Lan Xishan says it, like when Lan Wenxi asks, like, who could have done this, Lan Xishan points at the sky, specifically at the sun, which is the symbol of the Wen clan. And we also get some information about the Wens, which at this point are the biggest and more powerful sect. So what is it that essentially is that the Wen clan is huge. They nightless city, nightless sky. That is the name. It was named Nightless Sky. That is the name of the city, also called Nightless Celestial City, and it was literally a city. Like, the clan was huge. So and they were very powerful. So this means that if they were in fact responsible, which we know they are, there would be no consequences for them, because what are the others going to do if they are much smaller? And this puts the Gusu sect, like the Gusu Land sect, in a very shitty position, because there's not, like, what are they going to do? So that's that. They have to find a way of dealing with this. There's nothing that they can do, so they are coming back to, cloud recesses. And Wei Wuxian decides to start flirting with some women to get some loquats. He gets a few for free because they said that they are handsome, and then he asks the women if they also don't think that Lan Wangji is handsome, which they very readily agree. You know what? Same. And they also give him a loquat for him. And Wei Wuxian tried to give the loquat to Lan Wangji, but he didn't take it. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want any loquat. He doesn't want anything from Wei Wuxian. And Wei Wuxian is a little mad about it, and he tells it that he knew he wouldn't accept it, so he never actually intended to give it to him. Which, rude. And he throws it to Shang Cheng. But then he tries to make Lan Wangji teach him to swear in the Gusu dialect, because, it's always these Lan Wangji hours for Wei Wuxian. And since it's always ignored Wei Wuxian hours for Lan Wangji, at this point, he just got in a different boat with Lan Xishan and said, I'm out of here. And, a boat of loquats, like a full boat of loquats, goes by, and Lan Wangji looks at it. I guess he might have looked at it with some kind of expression of yearning or something like that. Definitely Lan Xishan saw something in the expression. So he offers to buy him like a basket of loquats, which this offends Lan Wangji. He refuses. He says, I don't want to. And with a flick of his lips, he changes to boats again. At this stage, I think it's going to reach a point where Lan Wangji is going to run out of boats to change, because he just get him a boat for himself. He's just done with it. And that's pretty much the end of it. Obviously, this chapter is very heavy in terms of, action, because we have the whole fight and all of that. So, I pretty much, they didn't skip it. I read it, but when I describe it, I didn't go into the fight because it is just a fight. So let's talk about this chapter a little bit. First, we have the first hint of Su She wanting to imitate Lan Wangji, even knowing that Lan Wangji is a much more powerful cultivator. He's still trying to imitate him. So it's either Su She thinking too high of himself, like, oh yeah, I can do that too. So I don't know. I guess we get, because we know that Su She is someone who is trying to imitate Lan Wangji. So it's interesting to see already, this hint there, especially because at this point Suchet is just no one, it's just a background character. Then we have something that is also interesting, which is Chang Chen not helping Wei Wuxian, and you can also say like the rest didn't help Wei Wuxian. Like, what about the ones who were his own sect? Like, why aren't his own sect members also not helping Suchet? But the thing about Shang Cheng is that he made a point of going down to where Wei Wuxian was to tell him, like, what are you doing? I guess I'm just saving a life. So that tells you a lot, this position that Shang Chen has, that I haven't seen it here in the novel, but it's something that I did see in the Untamed, that he has this position that people from other clans are less important, so you shouldn't risk your life for them. This is something that in the Untamed, at least, we see it when they are in the Xuanyu cave. And after that Madame Yu tells them off, like, why do you risk your life? And Shang Chen also tells them, like, why do you risk your life for people from other sects? We have to look for our own. So, this little hint of Shang Chen that already has this tendency of what matters is our own. What does it matter? Why would you risk your life for somebody else? And also Wei Wuxian that doesn't care that he's going to save his life. Although at some point it proves very difficult for him to do it alone. Also, when Lang Wenji takes like Wei Wuxian carrying Suchet in his sword, like this moment where Shang Chen looked at them and said, there's kind of jealousy or an envy, like, oh, look what he can do at his age. And he's around my age too. I don't think I'll be able to do that. And there is a hint of envy. There is a hint of jealousy. And I feel like Shang Chen is constantly comparing himself to others. Maybe because his mother does that. His mother is constantly comparing to others. But I feel like this point, like, Lang Wenji and Lan Xishen are probably two of the more famous, cultivators of their age, like not of all of them, but from their age, especially Lang Wenji, if you compare it to other teens, he's probably the more famous because everybody knows him. I don't think you can compare to that. I think they are on a different league, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's also interesting that unlike the Untamed, because in the Untamed we have Wening there and we have Wenqin, and in the Untamed it's Wei Wuxian who grabs Wening, and then we have Lang Wenji who grabs Suchet, and then he grabs Lang Wenji, who's carrying like a boatload of people. But obviously that's because Wening is there and somebody had to save him. I don't remember what Wenqin was doing at the moment that she wasn't the one to do it. I'm guessing, I don't know, I think Chang Cheng was hurt or something like that. I have to rewatch it, although I have rewatched it several times already. The other thing from this chapter is how powerful the Wens are. Like, if you compare them to the other sex, to the point that the other sex cannot do anything about it because they know that they are so powerful that what are they going to do? If you tell them, and it's like, and so again, I feel that this is I don't know if it's a big difference. I don't know if the Untamed, we never saw the Wens as particularly big or powerful. Obviously, in the Untamed, the danger of the Wens, or what makes them so dangerous, was the fact that when Ruhan was also using resentful energy and he was doing that whole thing, he had the yin iron. So that was what made them more dangerous. But here, they're just a regular sect. They are not using, resentful energy. It's just that they are just so big. They are just big and powerful, and that's it. So it makes sense how difficult it is for the other sex to deal with them. I don't know. I find that interesting. And finally, this thing about the loquats. Loquats are disgusting. I said it. I don't know. I don't know what Wei Wuxian is so crazy about them. I don't know. But what I do know is, like, I think Lang Wenji did want some loquats. It's just that he was embarrassed. But I don't know. Hopefully one day he'll get some loquats. Okay, and that's it. That's the end of 17. Again, this wasn't very long because it was mostly action. It was mostly fighting. And that's it. Although we have some very interesting insights also in this chapter. And we reach the last chapter in the arc, which is chapter 18. And we have that after they come back from Kei, Lan Qiren was still in Qinhe, so the students were pretty much running amok in cloud recesses. And everything seemed to center around Wei Wuxian and Shang Cheng's room. But especially Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian seems to be like the leader of the group of students. And the boys spend their nights eating, drinking, wrestling, gambling, and viewing picture books. And you can guess the type of picture books that they were looking for because, you know, they are teenage boys. One morning, Lang Wangji appears in this room and everyone was just sleeping on the floor in a tangle because they had been drinking all night. They were all hungover. It was not a good look. Nihua-san is the first one to sort of become aware of what's happening, and he immediately tries to wake Wei Wuxian, but this proves really hard. At some point, Shang Cheng sort of wakes up. He doesn't wakes up completely, but he knows they're trying to wake up Wei Wuxian, so he throws a book at him, still being half asleep. Wei Wuxian, however, hugs the book that has landed on his chest, and he keeps sleeping. This is unfortunate because Lang Wangji decided to put some of his famous arm strength to good use, and he grabbed Wei Wuxian by the collar, again, kitten style, and dragged him to the door. It's also interesting that the book Wei Wuxian is hugging is actually a pornographic book. So, again, as a whole, not a great look. And Wei Wuxian is understandably confused. I mean, that is a hell of a way to wake up. Lang Wangji dragged Wei Wuxian to the front of the Lang sect ancestral hall. And there were 4 older disciples carrying discipline rulers. So Lang Wangji made Wei Wuxian kneel, and then the 2 of the disciples hold him in place. Then Lang Wangji kneel right next to him, and then he gives the order for the other disciples to strike. So obviously this is punishment. Punishment is here. And they receive 100 strikes, around 100 strikes. Isn't this exactly 100? About 100 strikes. And as you can imagine, Lang Wangji stayed with his back upright and proper position during the whole thing. He just kneeled and received it with grace, I guess. Wei Wuxian, not so much. He was the exact opposite. He didn't hold back at all. He was shouting, he was wailing. It wasn't a good look. After it was over, Shang Chen had to carry Wei Wuxian on his back, while the other disciples asked him what happened. And they were especially curious because, I mean, they understand why Wei Wuxian was being punished, like he must have done something. But why was Lang Wangji being punished too? So they find out that the night before, Wei Wuxian has lost a game of dice when he was with his friends. So because of that, he had to go down the mountain to get some Emperor's Smile. He did that, and on his way back, he was once again caught by Lang Wangji violating curfew. And Lang Wangji tells him that if a guest disciple violates the rule so many times, he has to go to the Lan sect ancestral hall to receive punishment. Wei Wuxian obviously tried to talk himself out of trouble by trying to convince Lang Wangji to let him go just this one, as a small favor. You can imagine Lang Wangji's response to that was not positive. So he grabbed his sword and started to chase Wei Wuxian with it. When Wei Wuxian saw that Lang Wangji was really not going to let this go, he essentially changed strategies. He stopped dodging, like he was just, he wasn't attacking Lang Wangji, he wasn't returning the attack. He was just dodging. So he stopped dodging, and what he did was just threw himself at Lang Wangji, clinging to him and make him fall outside of cloud recesses, because they were fighting it. I don't think it says necessarily, but apparently they were fighting like on the roof or over the wall. And when I say cling, I mean cling. It says Nihua-san asked him, why didn't he break free from you? Wei Wuxian says, he did try. But with him locking him in arms and legs, he couldn't break free even though he wanted to. Unable to even get up from my body. He was as hard as a board, meaning Lang Wangji, which is, if Wei Wuxian, if only you knew. So, essentially, they were both outside of cloud recesses at this point and breaking curfew, meaning that Lang Wangji now had to punish himself. And that was Wei Wuxian's reasoning. So Wei Wuxian probably hoped that if Lang Wangji had to punish himself as a way to avoid that, he wouldn't punish Wei Wuxian either. Well, this was obviously a miscalculation. He didn't know how willing Lang Wangji was of receiving punishment. So, they were there, they were lying down, so they got up after, throwing him outside, and Wu Wuxian tells him that he wouldn't tell anyone else about him being, out of curfew and outside of cloud recesses, and as long as, well, he actually doesn't tell her. He says, he won't tell anyone, and he walk off. And he was expecting that to be the end of it. But I think it was understood that, if I tell everyone what happened, you will have to be punished too. And as the group was leaving, they meet Lan Xishen. And Lan Xishen asked him what's going on. He obviously wasn't part of this punishment. And since cloud recesses is, in cloud recesses, the person responsible for the punishments is Lang Wangji. Obviously, Lan Xishen was not involved. He didn't know anything. And he expressed some concern about Wei Wuxian because Wei Wuxian could barely walk. So he examines his wounds and he decides that they weren't actually very severe. So he doesn't, or at least they weren't severe enough to require medicine. So he will just need to be like a few days resting, and that's it. But if he wanted to heal even faster, he could go to the cold springs. And who should be in the cold springs but Lang Wangji himself? And Lang Wangji obviously asked Wei Wuxian, what are you doing here? How did you get here? And Wei Wuxian told him that it was Lan Xishen who told him where to come. And I can hear from here Lang Wangji cursing his brother. Poor Lang Wangji. And Wei Wuxian didn't even pause, he didn't even wait, he just took off his clothes and he onto the cold spring, that's it. Giving what I imagine a stroke to Lang Wangji. And Wei Wuxian found the cold spring unexpectedly cold for some reason, even though it's called a cold spring. So he tried to move around just to, avoid freezing, which Lang Wangji put a stop, stop moving. But also because he was interrupting him, Lang Wangji was there meditating in peace, so this was an interruption to what he was doing. And it also says that it takes a while to get accustomed, not in time, it takes doing it many times for people to get accustomed to being in the cold spring. So it makes sense that Lang Wangji was fine in it because it seems like he had been doing it before. While Wei Wuxian, this is his first time, so that's why he was freezing. So there is Wei Wuxian moving around, trying not to freeze to death, and Lang Wangji just stops and said, "Stop moving," and he grabs Wei Wuxian by the shoulder. This was a big mistake because now Wei Wuxian felt warm coming from the place where their bodies were connected. So he shifted closer to Lang Wangji, saying that his side was warmer. As one does. So, Lang Wangji obviously put a stop to this. This is unacceptable. But Wei Wuxian still wanted to get closer to Lang Wangji. So he chose another strategy. He chose the flattery route. So he told him how much he admired him and, how cool he was and all of that. It wasn't effective. Lang Wangji was not someone who is affected by flattery, apparently. So eventually Wei Wuxian asked him why he doesn't want to become friends with him since they were so familiar. And he says that there are a lot of benefits to becoming his friend. He says that he's always very loyal, which is something that I can very easily believe. That anytime that he gets new porn, he always lends it. He's always, giving it to his friends. That he knows in Human, he knows the best places to go. If he ever goes to Lotus Pier, he will show him where to eat food and where to pick lotus seeds and water chestnuts. And he asked, Lang Wangji if he wanted to go. Lang Wangji said no. And he tries to convince him by saying that the girls in Human were very pretty. And, a different sort of pretty in Gusu, because I can imagine that in Gusu they are absolutely gorgeous. And then he winked his left eye at Lang Wangji, like, you sure you don't want to come? And Lang Wangji is like, no, what are you saying? Like, what are you offering? No, Lang Wangji is not interested in that. So, then we have Lan Qiren returning. Lan Qiren finally is back to Cloud Recesses, and he actually didn't make Wei Wuxian copy any more lines, thank God. He just scolded him in front of everyone, which is something that is obviously not very effective on Wei Wuxian. He doesn't give a shit. So he pretty much grinned the whole time. I think he was actually proud of being scolded, but, definitely not a good punishment. The problem was now that because of the waterborne abyss, it created a huge problem for the Lans, and Lan Qiren spent a lot of the time dealing with it. So the lessons became a lot shorter and shorter, and students had started to have a lot of free time. That day, Wei Wuxian was going to hang out with a group of 7 or 8 people when they saw Lang Wangji alone by the window, and they have a conversation with Chang Cheng and Ni Huasan about why Wei Wuxian keeps bothering him. Like, what is it? What's the attraction? And it essentially boils down to, for Wei Wuxian, it's fun. It's fun to bother Lang Wangji because of how boring he is. It's fun to see someone like him reacting to the things Wei Wuxian does. And, the group goes away, then comes back, returns to Cloud Recesses around noon, and Lang Wangji was still sitting in the desk doing his thing when he heard a noise from the window. Never a good sign. Who could it be but Wei Wuxian asked him if Lang Wangji had missed him? Lang Wangji ignored him, of course, and long story short, the same old story. Wei Wuxian teased him, Lang Wangji told him to leave, Wei Wuxian refused. He said he was there to apologize and give him a present, but Lang Wangji had heard about his apologies and he's not interested. So Wei Wuxian gives the present to him anyway, and they were 2 rabbits, 2 wild rabbits. And he says it's actually strange that there aren't any pheasants around Cloud Recesses, but there are a lot of wild rabbits, and they aren't scared of people, which would make sense because if the Lans don't hunt them, I guess they wouldn't see them as, predators. So Wei Wuxian asks Lang Wangji if he wants them, and Lang Wangji stares him indifferently. So Wei Wuxian says that he was going to give them to someone else who was going to eat them. And now he gets a reaction. So Lang Wangji is not having those rabbits eaten under no circumstances. So in the end, he does accept them. And there is a description of, the rabbits, and it says one had bleary eyes and lay on its stomach, remaining motionless even after a long while. As it chewed on its lettuce, its pink mouth moved in a leisurely manner. The other one, however, seemed as if it was actually a cricket, constantly hopping up and down. It played around with its companion, wriggling and leaping non-stop, which is a very interesting description. Suddenly, one of the rabbits got on top of the other and started doing as, rabbits do, having some fun. Maybe it was the mating season. This shocked Lang Wangji since they were both males, and Wei Wuxian started teasing him because he hadn't even noticed that they were males, and tells Lang Wangji, what were you looking for that you noticed that they were males? So this is the last straw, and Lang Wangji just threw Wei Wuxian out of the library, and Wei Wuxian was just laughing the way out. He had a great time. After that, Lang Wangji stopped having classes with them. Apparently, during lessons, Wei Wuxian changed seats several times. And at first, he was sitting next to Chang Cheng, which was a problem because Chang Cheng sat very close to, the front of the class, and then he went to sit behind Lang Wangji, and it was a very good position because he could bother Lang Wangji and at the same time hide behind him, so he could sleep and could do nothing during class and he was fine. But then Lan Qiren noticed that he was doing this trick, so he switched their seats. So now Wei Wuxian was sitting in the front and Lang Wangji on the back. However, now Lan Qiren decided to stop Lang Wangji from having classes with them, possibly because he thought Wei Wuxian was a bad influence on his nephew. And then we have some information about the founder of the Lan sect, the Lanan, who originally was a monk born in a temple and who later became a musician and made his fated person, and with her he founded the Lan sect. And this is a lesson that Lan Qiren was giving, that he was explaining like some windows or something like that, and he was telling this represents the path that our founder took. And Wei Wuxian found it very interesting / hilarious, since the fact that the lands were founded by a monk, since it explains just the way the lands were, with the whole rules, the whole, being ascetic and things like that. Definitely it fit their profile. And he also wondered how a person like Lan An, who had such a, let's say, a romantic story as the foundation of the Lan clan, could produce such unromantic descendants. And this turned into a conversation towards the idea of cultivation partners and girls. Someone asked Xin Sichuan who he thought was the best girl, because they were saying like, oh, who would you marry? Who would you like? What do you think about this girl? Again, teenage boys. So they asked Xin Sichuan who he thought was the best girl. At this, Wei Wuxian and Jiang Cheng started to pay attention. And someone else says that Xin Sichuan already had a fiancé, so the answer is obviously would be her. When they asked him for more information, he just said, forget it. And we get a description of Xiang Shangli, which is obviously done, I believe, from an outside perspective, like from the perspective of the group rather than from the perspective of the character, or maybe it's the perspective, I don't know, but it's definitely not the perspective of either Shang Cheng or Wei Wuxian, because it's not a very flattering description. It says that she has a very mild personality, that nothing of her is too notable, that she's not memorable, she's very average, she didn't have any astonishing talent, that amid all of the girls from all the prominent clans, it was, she was pretty much average. So definitely not something that was, not something very nice. So according to this, according to this description, her and Xin Sichuan, they weren't very well matched and were only engaged because their mothers were friends. And since Xin Sichuan was a very proud person and he had very high standards, he wasn't happy about this union. And he wasn't happy not only because of, Shanli herself, but also because he saw it as something that it was essentially forced onto him, not something that he chose. And he right out asked, why don't you ask me how on earth can I be satisfied with her? So this makes Chang Cheng stand up immediately, but it's Wei Wuxian the one who goes to Xin Sichuan and confronts him. And Xin Sichuan, again, just digging his own grave, responded, if she's unsatisfied, then tell her to get rid of the engagement. In conclusion, I don't care for your shishie, something like that. I'm learning Chinese, and I know chie is sister, so I guess the second part is chie, I think. This is so difficult. The pronunciation part is so difficult. Anyway, if you care for her, ask her father about it. Doesn't he treat you better than treating his own child or something? My God. This obviously touching her with Chang Cheng, and Wei Wuxian went for punching Xin Sichuan straight in the face. And thus, the fight began. Obviously, because of this fight, the sect leaders of each clan were called to, cloud recesses to, deal with this. So Shang Fengmian and Xing Guanshan hurried to cloud recesses, and after dealing with their own sons and disciples and whatever, I'm hitting a water bottle. When I talk, I move my hands a lot. Obviously, you can see it, and I'm trying to avoid hitting the microphone, so I push them away. Now I'm hitting things around it. So let me move this to a different place. After dealing with their sons and disciples, they went to talk to Lan Qiren. And that's when Xiang Fengmian brings up the idea of breaking the engagement. He says that it had been something arranged by Maran Yus and not really his idea. And neither of the people involved are very keen on getting married. and Xin Weishan was not in favor of breaking the engagement, but Zhang Fengmian insisted. He said, although we can set the engagement for them, we can carry out the marriage in place of them. After all, they are the ones who will be spending the rest of their lives together. And definitely I think Zhang Fengmian has some experience about marriages, so definitely he knows what he's talking about. The thing is, Xin Guxian's problem was not the engagement himself. He thought that actually he could do better, and or he wasn't afraid of getting someone better for his son. But what he was afraid was Madame Jim. However, since Zhang Fengmian was proposing it, he agreed to break the engagement. Somewhere else, Wei Wuxian was kneeling. That is as part of the punishment. Shan Sheng went to talk to him and told him that Zhang Fengmian came to cloud recesses. And we found out that Shang Chen also planned to hit Xin Sichuan, but that Wei Wuxian beat him to it. And Wei Wuxian said that he should have left Shang Chen hit him. That way Zhang Fengmian wouldn't have turned to cloud recesses. So we find out, it says, Zhang Fengmian had never hurried to another sect in one day for anything related to him. And this is told from, I guess, Shang Chen's perspective. No matter if the issue was good or bad, large or small, never. Again, very, very interesting. We also find out that as he was kneeling, Lang Wangji had visited Wei Wuxian just in a moment when he was playing with some ants and his shoulders were shaking for some reason. I guess he was laughing or something like that. And Lang Wangji thought he was crying. And, he was very disappointed. Well, not very disappointed, but he was mad at the fact that he wasn't actually very penitent about being there. And essentially, that night, Wei Wuxian returned to Yumen with his uncle, and that's the end of the Cloud Recesses arc. And that's pretty much it. That's the end of chapter 18. So let's talk a little bit about chapter 18. We have, again, several very interesting information, very interesting hints that we can talk about. The first one is Wei Wuxian being sort of a leader and having so many friends among the disciples. And I guess this is a difference from the Untamed. But it makes sense because I feel like if they added a lot of characters, it would have made things more confusing and they would have to pay more to, have more characters being there. In the Untamed, we only really see him with Shang Chen and Ni Huasan, but it makes sense with his personality that Ni Huasan, Wei Wuxian is somebody who's very friendly, make friends very easily, and very easily takes this place as a sort of leader of a group. Another interesting thing is Lang Wangji being in charge of punishments. I guess this is only for the juniors, not for everyone. But Lang Wangji is kind of like 15, 16. So it says how much trust his uncle has on him. But still, to me, that's very young to be placed in that position. And also, it's placed in a position that makes him so apart from everybody else, I think. I guess he already has a personality that he doesn't like socializing and all of that. But I think him being that doesn't help that a lot. It's also interesting that after Wei Wuxian receives the punishment, Shang Chen starts telling him off, what he did and, you deserve it and all of that. But also he had drunk himself and he had drink when Wei Wuxian had brought alcohol. So I don't know. I think I like the version of the Untamed more in which he's also punished. But I guess Lang Wangji wasn't punishing necessarily for drinking, but he was more punishing for having found him the previous night, outside. And the fact that he waited for the next morning also seems to support my idea that Wei Wuxian's fear of being dragged in the middle of the night was definitely unjustified. Like, he was dragged, but that's because he was sleeping late. But I feel like Lang Wangji, if he wanted, he could have it punished earlier. I guess he wouldn't because there is a curfew and everybody would be sleeping. But again, definitely Wei Wuxian's fear of being dragged in the middle of the night, that were a little bit unjustified, I think. Then we have the conversation between Wei Wuxian and Lang Wangji, when Lang Wangji catches him breaking curfew, and that is actually pretty much the same. The ending is different, but what happens in that situation is very similar to what we see in the Untamed when they first meet. That, Wei Wuxian is entering cloud recesses with the alcohol. So again, I like that they keep, even if they adapted a little bit, I like that they keep these conversations and all of that. I don't know. I think it shows a lot about the dynamic between the characters. It's also interesting that in this version, Lan Xishen doesn't know about the punishment. So when he sends him to the cold springs, he doesn't know Lan Wangji is there, which is very different to the Untamed, in which, obviously Lan Xishen knows everything that happened because he was there, and he also knows that Lan Wangji was punished, so he knows precisely where Lan Wangji is and what Wei Wuxian is going to find if he goes there. So again, interesting. I do think Lan Xishen is a little bit of a troll when it comes to his brother, and I love him for it. Let's see what else. When it says he glanced at Lan Wangji's palms and shoulder, the bruises were still there, meaning that Lan Wangji really wasn't here to heal. So that talks about when Lan Wangji was in the cold springs, that is what Wei Wuxian sees. And I understand, it says the bruises were still there, meaning that Lan Wangji really wasn't here to heal. I don't know if that is a mistranslation, that it was awkwardly translated, because I would say that if the bruises were still there, he was there to heal. But if he wasn't, I find this very interesting, because someone told me that the cold springs in Cloud Recesses are also a way that the Lan clan has of dealing with, pent up sexual frustration, let's say. So, I guess that's why he was there. I don't know. But in this case, I suspect it's probably a mistranslation. I'm not sure. Somebody who has the official translation can tell me. Then it says that that there is a moment where they go by the window. They are talking about Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji. And Wei Wuxian looks at Lan Wangji, he says, as he's looking at them, and he was definitely had a very disapproving look on his face. He said he's probably thinking about how to find fault with us. And I find this phrase so reminiscent of Pride and Prejudice, like Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, and also how these characters are very reminiscent of them, having like Lan Wangji, who is proud, who, he has his values and all of that, and he tends to disapprove of a lot of things that don't meet like his standards, at least at this stage. And then we have Wei Wuxian, who also has a lot of prejudice against Lan Wangji, because he doesn't know him that well. He has this idea of Lan Wangji, but in reality, he doesn't actually know him. And I don't know, I haven't looked for it, but I hope there is at least one story written based on them as, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, because I think the characters definitely match them very well. Then I love the fact that the description of the rabbits, as one of them being more calm and the other one being more, let's say, enthusiastic and more active, definitely paralleling their personalities. And, then what the rabbits were doing, maybe a little bit of, hindsight to what's going to happen in the future. It's interesting also that Wei Wuxian calls the Lans unromantic, because I feel like they're not maybe as open about it, but I think they're obviously very passionate. Like, maybe they are very self-regulated and self-controlled. But I also have the feeling that, look at Lan Wangji's dad. Like, obviously, it's not like they lack passion. Obviously, look at look at Lan Wangji. Obviously, they have passion. I think it's more like, what is that expression? Still waters run deep, I think. I think definitely they're very passionate. I think there are actually romantics. And obviously, Lan Wangji falling in love with Wei Wuxian and staying true to him for, even after his death, you can't tell me that that is not romantic. That is the definition of romantic. But, Wei Wuxian doesn't know them that well. Then we have Xin Sichuan commenting on this about Wei Wuxian was treated. I don't know if he was treated better by Chen Fengmian than his own son. What he says is that usually Xiang Fengmian has to come running when something happened with Wei Wuxian, but when something happens with Xiang Chen, he doesn't. And I thought, at first I thought it might be common knowledge, like, oh, the same way people know about, Wei Wuxian's situation and all of that. But then I remembered that Madame Jim and Madame Yu were friends. So that's probably where he get that, because I imagine that maybe if they ever meet, Madame Yu must talk about Xiang Fengmian and Wei Wuxian and all of that to Madame Jim. So maybe that's why Madame Xin has this idea of Xiang Fengmian. But also, I don't know. I think on the one hand, I'm pretty sure that in this case, it's not like he hurried to cloud recesses because of Wei Wuxian himself. I have the feeling that he hurried rather because of Yan Li's engagement. I have the feeling that if Wei Wuxian had fought somebody else, I don't know, if he had punched Nihua-san, I don't think it would have bothered coming. Like, send the letters like, yeah, fine. The reason why they were there is because of their engagement, because, they have to deal with that. But I also feel that Xiang Cheng is the son of a sect leader, and as opposed to Wei Wuxian, whose position is a little bit more complicated, he's at best a disciple. I think maybe he would be afraid of Wei Wuxian suffering more consequences than Xiang Cheng, or maybe he just thinks that Xiang Cheng is not going to do as many things as Wei Wuxian. I don't know. I will take this with a grain of salt, because I feel it's either Xin Sichuan's perspective, who is, I think, very tainted to, Madame Xu by his mother, Madame Jin, but also Xiang Chen, who I also think has a very askew perspective of the situation. Again, maybe because of his mother, or I don't know. So I'm not so sure about it. I'm very curious to see, when we get to the chapters when we actually see them interact, I see them a little bit more, I'll form my opinion then. This is interesting how different Lan Qiren's attitude is in the Untamed. Like, he was mad at Wei Wuxian in general for his existence. He was apparently the enemy of the world. But we know when he's talking to Xiang Fengmian and Xin Guanshan, he's not mad. It's like, he considers the fight as like, oh, they're just boys. They were fighting. That's it. It's not too deep. He just made them kneel and that's it. And the same with him, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like in this case, like, yeah, they fight. That's it. He's pretty chill. As a whole, I can tell that in the novel, Wei Wuxian is out to annoy Lan Wangji, and I can understand how people get the idea that they were enemies, or even why Wei Wuxian feels that they were enemies, because definitely they weren't friends. And this is very different from the Untamed, since in the Untamed, obviously because how the Untamed works, it's a TV show, they have to reorganize the events, they have to, change a few things. In the Untamed, I feel like their friendship starts a lot earlier. Like, after the Cold Pond Cave, or whatever it's called, when they get the yin iron and all of that, I feel starting from that, definitely their relationship became a lot more friendly and openly friendly. Or at least Wei Wuxian is more openly friendly towards Lan Wangji, and Lan Wangji is more willing to listen to Wei Wuxian, more willing to accept him. Which is definitely very different what happens here. Here, it was no at all. Like, Wei Wuxian was enemy number one. Of course, we don't know what Lan Wangji was actually feeling. But I can see here why there is this idea that they were enemies, which to me in the Untamed, it never really makes sense. Especially much later, said, oh, they were always enemies. Were they? Because I seen them being enemies for a little while in Cloud Recesses, and the rest of the time they were friends. So, I don't know. Definitely, I think the novel can afford to go a lot slower with the relationship. So I think in the Untamed, they have to maybe hurry it a bit. They have to change it, because obviously in the novel, you have the payout. Like, at the end, they get together. Spoilers, I already know that they get together. At the end, they get together. This is something that the Untamed doesn't have. So it has to find other ways of showing the closeness in the relationship. For this, they need to start a lot early. So I understand why they changed that in the novel. Honestly, I don't mind. Okay, so that is the end of the refinement arc. And I don't know, I was thinking about the word refinement. Like when I started reading the chapters, like what does it mean by that? And I'm pretty sure, obviously, refinement, it's referring more to the idea of these cloud recesses classes, I believe, because I feel like the lessons in cloud recesses, they weren't necessarily lessons for them to be, cultivators. I feel like they already learned that. That is something that they learn in their own sex. They don't go there to learn cultivation. What they go there to learn is more like manners and clans' histories and, things like that. I feel like cloud recesses is more like a finishing school or a polishing school. So I think this idea of refinement of, how now these characters have to, through cloud recesses, they start to relate to one another. They have to know the other sex, things like that. That is what they are refined, what they are learning. That goes beyond the lessons, I feel. So it was a very interesting arc. I had a lot of fun, but I have the feeling that this was obviously, a more lighthearted arc. But we know that the time and cloud recesses were pretty lighthearted, and we know that it doesn't last, that eventually we're going to have much harsher arcs, and I'm not looking forward to them. But that was it. This was the refinement arc. I just don't think I have anything else to say other than I really enjoyed. I'm really enjoying doing this. I'll see when I can do. I don't know what's the next arc or how long it is. It depends on, depending on how long it is, I'll see if I can get it, sooner rather than later. But who knows? And in terms of my other reactions, this week I'll only do morao sushi on Friday, and then I'll go back to my other reactions next week, just so I have time to reorganize everything and all of that, and also because I want to, I'm watching this other Japanese show called I was going to say the Japanese name. Why would I? The show that I'm watching is called Dangerous Partners. It's really fun, and it's been, aired right now. So I wanted to, catch up with all of the episodes that have been out so I can start watching it, as we go. So in all probability, I'll restart with the other reactions next week. Okay, guys, so that was it. I hope you enjoy it. Sorry if I was a little rusty. I obviously had forgotten what it's like to speak to a microphone for so long. So, sorry about that. I hope you enjoyed it anyway. And I hope you come back for the rest of the arcs. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.